the stage Meryl Irwin. She'll be talking about the Citizenship test and the laws that help make it. She's one of those people that would keep taking college classes forever if it was possible. So entertainment that feels vaguely like a lecture is exactly the kind of thing that she likes. She is nearly done with her doctorate of philosophy at the University of Iowa and is currently teaching at Drake University. Let's give her a big round of applause.
I'm not actually going to handle the mic. I don't trust myself with it. So, I study political communication, and especially the ways in which immigration influence our identities as Americans. The United States has a split personality when it comes to immigration. We're very proud of saying that we are a nation of immigrants, but at the same time it makes us a little uncomfortable and nervous when we get a few too many strangers in our midst. So in 2008, one of the important ways that the United States tries to manage the immigrants that come into our midst changed, and that's the Citizenship test. The United States Immigration and Citizenship Service started using a new set of questions for its citizenship test, that is the history and civics exam. And those questions are supposed to make new immigrants more patriotic. And for my dissertation, I'm studying this exam and those changes. And to be honest, I could talk to you for literally days about this. But tonight I'm just going to focus on a few of the laws that significantly shaped what that citizenship test looks like today. Starting with the Constitution and going up through 1990. Are there any naturalized citizens here tonight? Is anybody naturalized? Oh, that's really excellent. I think deserve a round of applause. They could probably tell you a lot more than I can about the struggles that they had in terms of getting their citizenship. But the requirements that they had are 200 years plus in the making. Most people don't realize that the Constitution actually doesn't define what a citizen is. What it does do, however, is give to Congress the right to create rules about who can naturalize to become a citizen. And that might be because 7 delegates to the Constitutional Convention were actually foreign nationals, and it would have been kind of awkward for them to sign on to the Constitution when they weren't actually citizens. It wasn't until 1868, with the passage of the 14th Amendment, that citizenship was actually written into the Constitution by that amendment. And that became necessary because of the end of the Civil War, when they wanted to ensure that states couldn't enact different citizenship laws than the federal government again. All the citizenship definitions, then, are a matter of congressional law. And I'm going to just walk you sort of fly through time to highlight 5 of those laws for you tonight that formed the citizenship test as we know it today. The first came in 1790, which also was the year that shoelaces were invented. Did you realize that they had been invented? I actually didn't. But this was the law that actually established what we call jus sanguinis citizenship, or citizenship by birthright of inheriting it from your parents. And it was really backhanded. They basically set up that the people born of foreign national parents could be naturalized, and then by default, people who were born of the parents who were U.S. nationals were then U.S. citizens. So it was really backhanded. It also established some things about citizenship or naturalization that hang on through today, which were a period of residency, taking an oath of allegiance, and being of good moral character. But there's really no history or citizenship questions. In 1802, the first comic book was published called The Wasp, and in that year Congress added some new requirements that still come through today. That's a declaration of intention had to be made, as well as an age requirement was added at 21 years old. The oath of allegiance was also expanded in that year, that you had to say, I no longer will claim my titles, nor will I be have an allegiance to a foreign dignitary of any kind. And judges had to find a way to be satisfied with the moral character and to find, for the first time, attachment to the principles of the Constitution. So that's actually the first time anything about civics or history ever got suggested. Moving on to 1906, are there any football fans in the room? Do you know what happened in 1906?
Banning of football.
What?
Banning of football.
No, it was the forward pass rule, but good try. The forward pass rule comes into play in 1906. And also in 1906, a couple more requirements. This is the first English language requirement comes into play in 1906. and also comes into play that the applicant has to sign the application themselves, which will eventually become the written requirements for English, that you have to write in English. It also introduced into the court proceedings mandatory witnesses. So it wasn't enough that the person themselves had to say, I'm a good moral character, but there had to be 2 more people that said you were as well. In 1926, Hirohito becomes Emperor of Japan, and that's also the year that the Congress decided that judges didn't have to conduct these examinations themselves, but they could appoint a proxy. And that proxy came out of a tiny little department under the Secretary of Commerce, which was the Bureau of Immigration. And this is the first time that someone called, actually with the title examiner, comes into the process of naturalization. And those examiners start to share some pretty significant power with judges. And that's a really important transition that takes place. In 1940, not only does the Blue Fairy turn Pinocchio into a real boy, but something also important happens in terms of Congress. What they began in 1940 in giving some responsibility by proxy to examiners from the Bureau of Naturalization becomes a significant proportion of power. The INS finally has been named under the Bureau of Naturalization, and they become the first and really primarily the only way in which new citizens are approved is through the INS. In 1990, that's me, I graduated from high school. So, lots of good things happened in 1990. But in terms of the citizenship test, in 1990, there's a sweeping reform bill that gets put through that writes back into the law a whole bunch of changes. And those changes were made necessary by the 1986 Immigration Control and Reform Act, which basically is the one that we talk about granting amnesty to a number of residents who did not have legal status, but then they were granted status and began a path to citizenship. Those changes really were important in terms of creating a situation in which the internal procedures of the INS, their day-to-day practice of interviewing people, came to have the force of what used to be a court proceeding. So the bureaucracy of the INS comes to be like a court proceeding. As you can see, testing takes on a whole new meaning. So I hope that taught you a little something. So, thanks.